On M41 in 816 in Port Wanda, the light of the Golden Throne is a distant myth, and the Expanse breathes its own scriptures now. There is a place beyond the void lines of sanctioned travel where coordinates fray and names bleed. The Imperium calls it the Koronus Expanse, but that is a designation of ignorance, a name forced upon the dark by those who hoped a title could keep it still. It did not. No void chart survives first contact with the Maw, and no mind returns from it whole. Before the Expanse became the theatre of ambition, before Footfall's grav anchors bit into drifting rock and declared it a station, the region was only myth, a promise whispered by navigators mad enough to see beyond the warp's screaming veil. The Koronus fragments, uncovered in decaying Mechanicus data looms, were the first to suggest a truth buried beneath deliberate silence. A route through the storms. Worlds unclaimed. Riches untouched. An unspoiled vein of reality untouched by compliance. The data was broken, incomplete. The fragmentary logs of an unknown explorator fleet told of mineral worlds and void beasts made of gas and time, but no coordinates remained. No path. Just heat scars on rusted circuits and stars that no longer matched the sky. Still, these hints spread like infection. The Angevin Crusade, soaked in Xenos blood and sanctioned annihilation, carved the Calixis sector into shape, but it could not reach beyond the warp wall. It was the navigator Mechanicus, branded mad by his own house, who reignited the delusion. He spoke of a narrow artery through the storms, a path drawn by the hand of the Emperor himself. He claimed it pulsed with gold light and sang his name in echo when no one else was near. They called it the Mistaken Age. Rogue traders died by the dozens. Some vanished without a ripple. Others were found drifting with their crew's eyes burned out, clutching liturgical scrolls that hadn't been written yet. But among them, passage stations began to form, abandoned rocks, caged atmospheres, relay beacons stitched from hulk carcasses. They were not waypoints. They were graves made to look like paths. And then came Port Wanda, a fortress meant to observe, a bastion to deny forgetting. Its birth was not a conquest, but an inquiry, built by the Navy to investigate too many disappearances and answer too few questions. But the questions outlived the ships, and the Navy left. What remained was hunger. By the end of M40, an entire economy had grown around silence. Chartists traded falsified coordinates soaked in incense. Mechanicus cartotheurgists offered augury tithes to machine spirits of corrupted cogitators. Ecclesiarchal scribes collected void legends like relics. Port Wanda became the eye of a storm that did not move. Then Purity Lathimon returned. Her crew screamed hymns backward. Her psychers clawed at their own skulls. Her vessel's hull bore script etched in languages none could name. But her course was true. She had mapped it. They called it the Maw. The name stuck. It always does, when it describes the thing that devours. And through it, the Koronus Expanse became more than myth. It became territory, opportunity, an open wound, waiting to be stepped into. But the Imperium did not name it first. The Warp did. And the Warp has always been a patient author. 998 of M40, the Sceptre'd Rose vanishes into the Maw. There is no debris, no vox, just silence woven into void. The story doesn't start with blood. It starts with absences, with ships that never made port, captains who were never seen again, and hulls found where no transit paths existed. The Expanse didn't offer battles. It offered questions. And the first of those questions had a name: the Sceptre'd Rose. Lady Juno Darkman had been the third to follow Lathimon's chart. She was cautious, observant, and backed by a bark known for its reliquary-kept machine spirit. Her ship passed through the Maw on a blessed heading. Then, nothing. No warp wake, no beacon flare. She was gone. But that wasn't the end. That was the beginning. A century later, a derelict matching the Rose's specifications was sighted, 3 systems out from Port Wanda. It was intact, silent, and moving on no discernible trajectory. A salvage crew was dispatched. By the time the second team arrived, the first team had not reported. The second found the docking collars twisted into Mobius configurations. No entry possible. 3 auger pulses later, the ship was gone again. That's when the stories started. They called her a harbinger, a sign that the voyage was cursed if seen on departure, and sanctified if glimpsed on return. Sightings spread like prayer rot. Auspex phantoms matching the Rose's profile appearing near outbound warp transitions or trailing convoys without acceleration. Some even claimed she warped through them. No collision, just flickering pain in their comm beads and the taste of rust on the tongue. And she wasn't alone. The cauldron of savagery surfaced next. A space hulk, barbed and screaming, punched out of the great warp storms and fell upon the Drusus marches. Its hull bore marks from no known forge world, and its internal architecture was reported as layered wrong. The Navy tried to shadow it. Ships vanished in the attempt. A century later, the cauldron returned during etheric turbulence so fierce, even astropaths wept. This time, Esme Corda met it. Rogue traders, desperate not for glory but for survival, rallied under her banner. With the help of a threadbare battlefleet fragment, they bombarded the hulk and drove it into the Pellucidon sun. The star burned green for decades. But those that survived didn't speak of victory. They spoke of decks deeper than gravity, corridors that turned on themselves, and doors that opened only for the dead. Corda's reward was freedom of the subsector. Her lineage used it to build empire, but behind closed doors, her kin refused to speak of what she saw on the cauldron. Then came Lopan. A signal bled through the void. Garbled, incomplete. But something made it through. Serpent, of blood and glass. It sings, and then static. No trace of his ship was found. No warp trail, no debris. Just a chilling report archived at Port Wanda by an astropath who later took her own life. Each event stood alone until they didn't. By the time the Malfian princess arrived, every soul aboard reduced to dust older than the stars she passed. The pattern had grown undeniable. Something in the expanse wasn't just devouring matter. It was reshaping memory, erasing time, rewriting consequence. Each vanishing, each ship returned wrong, became more than tragedy. They became scripture. A dark liturgy the warp had begun writing in hull plates and void ash. Because this wasn't about being lost, it was about what waits to be found. In 997 of M40, one chart is made, one crew returns, and yet the warp marks no difference. They called it a passage. They were wrong. The moor was never a place. It was an act. The expanse had waited. It wasn't hidden. It simply hadn't decided to be seen. Purity Lathamon's crossing didn't open a corridor. It revealed a moment, a lapse in attention. The warp blinked, and she passed through. Her return was marked in scripture, yes, but her survival was mistaken for navigation. There is no true map of the moor. Every route is temporary. Every path collapses once used. Those who follow coordinates with confidence are the first to die. Lathamon's crew came back changed. Not broken. Not insane. Wrong. Their chronometers didn't match. Their skin wept fluid that reacted to starlight. One officer claimed her memories played in reverse during sleep. Purity sold her chart. She left with her silence. What followed was not exploitation. It was hemorrhage. Rogue traders surged forward, pouring through a wound in reality that would not remain open. And the Moor responded not with violence, but with mimicry. Vessels emerged where none had entered. Identical ships passed each other with crews who had never left port. Auspex units burned out trying to reconcile mass readings that changed mid-scan. A battleship crossed the moor 5 times in a row, believing each transit was the first. It arrived at Port Wanda older than the station. Some ships made it through. Most were lost. Others returned, but changed. The Whisper of Anaris first appeared as a sensor echo trailing the Winterscale fleet. At first dismissed as debris, then seen with the naked eye. Tattered sails, no vox, no light. A vessel that pulsed on Auspex like a heartbeat. then vanished between blinks. Elbor Winterscale refused to speak of it. Others named it Ghost Xenos or Warp Echo. But no one denied it had presence. And presence is not coincidence. By M41 in 540, the Expanse had become a thresher. The Maw ground the brave and the desperate against its spinning teeth. Each survivor brought back contradictions. Hull damage inconsistent with any known engagement. Logbooks that listed deaths of crew members still alive. Vox recordings of transmissions never sent. Worse were the false returns. Ships that made port before they left. In one recorded incident, the Vigilant Serenity arrived 3 weeks ahead of its departure. Customs scanned it. Crew disembarked. Hours later, the same ship emerged from the Maw and attempted to dock, only to find itself already in berth. Both crews claimed legitimacy. Both were terminated under inquisitorial oversight. The ship was impounded, then burned. Its ashes screamed. Some claimed it was the work of Xenos timecraft, others Hirtex. But the Occamite data paths flagged only one consistent truth. The Maw did not forget. It reprocesses. Patterns began to emerge. Ships whose machine spirits had been ritually soothed fared better. Crews with shared bloodlines recorded fewer psychological breaks. Vessels bearing relics from sacred worlds were more likely to arrive intact, but less likely to speak. And yet none turned back. Not because they feared poverty, but because some had seen the Expanse change around them. Star systems shifting position. Warp storms that throbbed like organs. Shadows across the hull before the lumen was lit. They were no longer seeking riches. They were seeking confirmation that they had actually existed. In 713 of M41, the explorators name it Midnight's Lair. They never agree on how many decks it had, or whether it had an inside. Not every ghost ship is seen. Some are found. They do not drift with the grace of forgotten mass. They do not burn beacon lights or scream for assistance. They appear like cysts, where space had been silent, impossible to predict, and harder to unsee. The first recovered was Midnight's Lair. No origin, no recorded build, no identifying insignia. It emerged not from warp, but from stillness. Static black, windowless, the hull bore striations like fossilized bone. Explorator crews tried to board it. Some reported success. Others swore it had no entry. No two accounts matched. But all agreed on one thing. Once seen, it never looked the same again. Tech priests from the Disciples of Thule catalogued its profile in at least 7 incompatible shapes: bark, dagger class, organiform hulk, semi-reflex spire. One Skitarii unit inside claimed the corridors changed direction mid-walk. Another reached what they believed was the core and found an empty chair, still warm. Their recording servitors failed. The picked feeds returned images of the Mechanicus ships that had sent them, viewed from outside, slowly drifting away. No one ever found the servitors. Midnight's Lair was sighted again, decades later, locked in orbit around an uncharted world near the heathen stars. 4 nearby ships went dark. Astropathic communication from the region degraded. One message got through, a simple pulse, a sound like breath, stretched to minutes. Then silence. Others followed. The Gaunt Triumph was located adrift, hull intact, propulsion dead. Boarding teams found 3 survivors. They spoke of a pale structure floating alongside them, shapeless and vast, whispering across the void. They had been trapped in a loop, 6 minutes, repeated for what felt like centuries. The pick screens aboard the Triumph displayed only a single, unchanging image: silver trees bleeding upward in a chamber where gravity inverted every 30 seconds. No such room existed on the ship. The Mechanicus declared the survivors irreparably paradoxed and terminated them. But the Triumph's cogitator kept running. It generated a timestamp 5 years ahead of real time, then deleted it, then did it again. The idea that ghost hulks are ruins is comforting, that they are derelicts, broken things. But what if they aren't abandoned? What if they're still moving, still navigating, by rules the Imperium was never meant to understand? The Duchess Iolanthe was a mainline ship in the Winterscale fleet. old, honored, blessed. She disappeared during the year of the Dreaming Depths. Her return wasn't noticed until a warp reflection made her appear twice on Auspex. She fired on her own shadow, and both vanished. A transcript of her last Vox burst reached Port Wander weeks later. It was incomprehensible, except one phrase buried in static, spoken by a voice that matched no crew member on record. I remember burning before we ever existed. And still they come. Ships with inverted keels. With no signs of entry but with recorded logs. Ships with crews still seated at their stations, perfectly preserved. But every heart stopped as if commanded. They aren't just dead, they are built wrong. Built from memory, built backwards. In 751 of M41, the Malfian princess docks 3 months late. Her Vox remains silent. Her reactor is cold. Her crew is dust. 10,000 souls, flash-aged into brittle ash. No sign of violence, no hull breach, no warp scarring. Just stillness, and a single word, etched into the dust on the captain's chair. Ragwitch. No records show that word exists in Low Gothic. No Xenos tongue offers a match. The Mechanicus declared it meaningless. The Ordo Xenos disagreed. They sealed the ship. But not before the stench of temporal rupture leaked into the archive. A minor Medicae technician who handled the dust died screaming. Every organ shutting down in reverse chronological order. His final words were, "It's too late." She's already sung. Others followed. There were voices in the Gaunt Triumph. They scratched, not at the hull, not at the doors, but inside minds. Not a scream, a memory repeating, glitching, digging itself deeper each time it played. Survivors wept when asked to describe it. One tried to claw out her ears with a combi tool. She was sedated. Her last coherent statement, "They talk like we already died." This isn't uncommon. The warp does not simply kill, it remembers you. It makes echoes out of thought and leaves them behind like fingerprints. And on Ghostships, the echoes talk. The crew of the Bridled Thorn reported a phantom deck, a level that didn't exist on any schematic, accessible only when moving at full void velocity. They found an old mess hall, filled with seated crewmen who looked identical to themselves. The figures didn't move. But when the boarding team tried to leave, the figures opened their mouths in unison. What came out was the team's own log entry, before they had recorded it. The event broke every auger. No record survived, except one pick recorder that looped a frame of the team's entry into the phantom mess, repeating infinitely, except in every iteration, one detail changed. A shoulder mark, a missing hand, a face that wasn't theirs. Some theories suggest these are just residual warp reflections. Others argue these are possibilities the warp is trying to anchor in reality. But those who spend time aboard Ghostships report stranger phenomena, dreams from lives not lived, memories of missions never taken, emotional responses to names they've never spoken. Astropaths are the first to fracture. Master Gartrafal collapsed in footfall, ranting of worms beneath a green-eyed star and seas of molten gold. His death was violent. Every mirror in his hab cracked outward. His last breath turned black in the air. That transcript, censored and redacted, became a black market devotional, read like prophecy by low-born navigators. Copies still circulate, and always at a price. Because every ship that comes back wrong leaves a name behind. Not just on records, in dreams. Lopan, Korda, Dachman, Iolanthi. To speak the names of ghost ship captains is to summon consequences. Not because they are cursed, but because the warp hasn't finished with them. 201 M41. The frigate Elementis Vulpa returns alone. Her Vox reports one phrase before implosion. He lit the black sun. Cobra's Aqua did not die, he disappeared. His fleet was massive, armed, blessed, sanctified. He bore both a greater warrant and inquisitorial seal, a duality that should have ensured untouchability. His mission was doctrinal purging, to root out those who fled Imperial justice, to scour Xenos anomalies from charts not yet drawn, and to plant the Emperor's truth into worlds that had never known his name. What he found was silence. Aqua pressed deep into the Koronus Expanse, far past the reach of patrol augers, far past the edge of light. Each report became more fragmented, less believable. Worlds of nothing but veins. Suns that pulsed in perfect hexameter. Empires made of stone, each ruler's skeleton still seated on their throne. He did not turn back. His last known vector was toward the rifts of Hecaton, a place already cursed by navigators, charted only in negative space, marked by where warp tides refused to flow. No ship had survived entry. But Aqua did not believe in warnings. His commands were prophecy, and he obeyed his own. The Elementis Vulpa was his last loyalist. He sent it back when the fleet reached the edge. Its crew delivered a fractured message, half song, half data cant. Coils, tightening, black light, under glass, he walks ahead, alone. It watches. Then nothing. Port Wanda received no other signals, no astropathic echoes, not even scrap mass. A decade passed, then 20, then a declaration of death in absentia. Some mourned, most did not, but even that was a lie. In 742 of M41, during the Battle of Agusia, a black iron ship appeared mid-conflict, bearing the sigils of Aqua's fleet. It fired on the heretics of the Amarat Union, destroyed a Corsair lance, then vanished. Every surviving rogue trader captain denied seeing it. Was it his flagship? A relic from the fleet? A warp-spawned echo? Or Aqua himself? Some claimed the rifts changed him. Others insisted he never went in, that he found something so dangerous it demanded he close the door behind him. The stories mutate. In some, he becomes a martyr who sacrificed himself to bar a threat too vast for transmission. In others, he is still alive, a guardian now, watching the edge of space for the thing that whispered its name into his mind. A few heretical texts, none proven real, claim he never had a choice, that the fleet was bait, that it was waiting. But what they all agree upon is this. His name is not safe to speak 3 times in a row near an active Vox channel. The Elementis Vulpa was impounded, its records purged, its hull smelted, its crew vanished. The Ordo Xenos claimed jurisdiction, but there was no trial. Only a final note in the Port Wanda archive, filed under emergency clearance protocols, no author listed. Whatever he found, it required his silence. Let us honor it. And beneath that, an older, forgotten script etched into the data slate's housing in blood rust lines. A Mechanicus notation long deprecated. It translates as, he went to close a mouth, or to become a tongue. In 703 of M41, Erasmus Harlock vanishes. 3 of his kin are found nailed to their own hulls. Their ship still powered. No crew aboard. There are absences the Imperium mourns, and there are those it fears. The Koronus Expanse is not only a realm of drifting wrecks and silent hulls. It is a place where entire histories vanish. Planets lose their moons. Star systems forget their names. Colonies report thriving populations, and then never speak again. In the unbeholden reaches, there was once a charted orbit of 12 planets. Only 6 remain. No detonation, no debris, just phantom mass, where augurs fail to confirm what pict recorders insist is there. The Expanse does not consume cleanly. Veronique Renuka fled into the void after the Cyclopia coup failed. She took wealth, war gear, and a private army. Her ship, the Thorn Empress, was last seen breaching toward the edge of Winterscale's realm. Years later, a pic capture emerged showing her vessel parked intact on a world not listed in any record, but the footage was anomalous, taken before her departure. How was her ship seen on a world she hadn't yet reached? No further images surfaced. The pict recorder's owner was found lobotomized, sitting upright, eyes covered in wax. Then came Sunarisla. Rediscovered by Hiram Salt, it should have been cause for celebration. Instead, he found a Genestealer infestation so advanced the colony no longer remembered it had once belonged to the Imperium. Every Vox hail was answered in perfect Low Gothic, spoken by mouths no longer fully human. Salt escaped with fragments of his crew. He glassed the world from orbit with every warhead he had. Still, it pulsed on Auspex weeks later, as if rebuilding from memory. But the most insidious disappearances are not of ships or systems. They are of records. There is mention in Harlock's fractured lineage of 3 rogue traders whose names have been struck from every official archive. Their warrants were voided posthumously. Their ship sigils reclassified as scrap. One scholar, now deceased, claimed they were part of a rogue council that challenged Harlock's claim. Their worlds no longer exist. Their bloodlines have no digital descendants. Yet in the scrapyards of Footfall, one trader still sells charms made of hull fragments etched with their personal crests. How can relics exist for names that do not? This is the deeper horror of the Koronus Expanse. Not the vanished, not the dead, but the rewritten. Whole void paths fall from memory. Ship trails collapse. Vox logs scramble. And what's left behind is not erasure, but misremembering. The Lost Paradise, whispered among voidsmen like a benediction, speaks of lush, untouched worlds where time slows, diseases heal, and gems flow from waterfalls. But no one returns. So how do we know they exist? And worse, how do we all know the same details? It is no longer enough to fear being lost. In the Expanse, the greater terror is to be half remembered, to be known incorrectly, to become the law someone else uses. In 816 of M41, Vox silence sweeps the heathen stars. 6 vessels vanish. 1 is seen again. It has no door. But there are voices. The warp does not discard. It hides. And sometimes it tries to give things back. But it never gives them back cleanly. The vessels that return are not reclaimed. They are regurgitated. Hulls warped to angles that bend light wrong. Decks repeated. Rooms duplicated. Lumens that flicker in perfect rhythm to no known chant. The air is too still. The grav fields don't fail. They decide. These are not repairs. These are decisions made by something that does not understand forgiveness. The Monarch of Whispers was once a relic, a pre-Angevin bark with a memory like steel and a soul like fire. When Ember Nostromo took it, navigator, fugitive, accused of heretical pacts, it began to change. She didn't pilot it. She listened to it. Let it show her roots others could not survive. She whispered to it. It whispered back. When the Sene clan boarded, they said the ship breathed, said the walls flexed when struck. The Monarch became something else. It never needed dry dock. It never again responded to Auspex correctly. When its pick signature was analysed, it showed glimpses of rooms that hadn't existed, and sometimes its own captain's body, decayed and fresh at once. But it kept moving, and it kept collecting others. Not all returned vessels are solitary. Some bring parasites. The White Sabre saw Midnight's lair again near the Undred Teeth, engaged with Orc raiders. The Orcs were losing, and then they weren't. They boarded it. They didn't survive it. The wreck of the Orc cruiser was later found, drifting, covered in a thin skin of unknown origin. Beneath the armor plating, human teeth had been pressed into the metal. Perfect rows. Each one stamped with a different Imperial designation code, none of which had ever been assigned. What makes these ships unclean isn't their damage, it's their memory. Lathaman's original course was written down, copied, replicated, and yet, when ships follow it now, they go missing. Even when simulated under Mechanicus observation, the models glitch, cogitators shut down in fear. Not error, fear. And when the models are forced to complete their journey, the simulation rooms heat. Not the air, the metal. Some believe the warp retains impressions of what passes through it, that it copies. Others believe it punishes recurrence. Then came the Strixis, Xenos traders of wandering voidcraft and moral rot. Their so-called Rust Palace appeared near the edge of God Emperor's scourge. They made deals, traded in things not found. Among their offerings, ship logs from vessels that never made port, picked captures of hulls lost to history, names of captains no one should remember. When asked where they found these things, they said only, "We walk where your minds scream." The ecclesiarchy forbade further trade. So did the Ordo Xenos. But some still go, because not everything the warp leaves behind is dead. Some things are just waiting to be found by the right memory. In 388 of M41, Fenton Cale dies 2 days after claiming he found an STC. His map sells for decades after. None are real. All are deadly. There are ships the warp forgets, and then there are ships we are told to forget. In the Expanse, the difference is doctrine. Not every ghost ship is born of tragedy. Some are engineered, deliberately obscured, reshaped, or manufactured by men who know the power of myth. Rogue traders are not saints. They are not liars. They are something far worse. Believers in their own distortions. Cale was no madman. He docked at Port Wanda speaking of a standard template construct buried on a dead moon near twin red stars. His voice was clear, his mind intact, his ship, the Malcontent, fully functional. He was assassinated within 48 hours. The Mechanicus denied involvement. The Inquisition issued no warrant. His crew disbanded. His first mate took the Malcontent and detonated it weeks later. Accidentally, according to the report. But the map, his so-called Cale's chart, circulated. Not one copy matched the others. And yet everyone sold to a desperate trader hoping to find the moon. Each expedition vanished, but the map kept appearing. Not as forged parchment or cogitator data, but as dreams. Voidborns reported seeing Cale's coordinates in their sleep. One astropath inscribed them into her own bones during a trance. The ecclesiarchy forbade mention of Cale in sermons. That was when people really started believing. Because this wasn't rumour, it was strategy. The Disciples of Thule, Mechanicus explorators obsessed with pre-Imperial knowledge, have long been accused of similar manipulations. When they found the DeLorean vaults, they published corrupted data, misleading coordinates, and partial truths. Some say they did it to discredit rivals. Others claim they sought to redirect traffic away from something they hadn't yet secured. But the damage was done. Hundreds died chasing dead paths. Rogue traders built ships based on falsified hull diagrams. One even named his vessel In Veritas Kylie. It detonated upon warp entry. Not because of sabotage, because the ship didn't understand what it was. That's the danger of false memory in the Expanse, not failure, self-deletion. Port Wanda attempted to regulate data flow, but the truth was never in the records, it was in the belief. A myth doesn't need to be real, it only needs to be dangerous. And when rogue traders began selling omens, the entire balance collapsed. A chipped hull plating from the Cauldron. A Vox fragment spoken by Lopan's last navigator. A lumen said to have flickered in sync with the Gaunt Triumph. None could be proven. All were believed. Even the Astral Knives got involved, declaring that some ghost ships were trials sent by the Emperor, tests of purity through fear. Those who survived their hallucinations were marked as blessed of the Wayne path. The cult grew. Assassins followed. And still, the maps kept being made. Because a ghost ship once seen is no longer a ship. It is a tool. Of faith, of fear, of economy. Because the worst truth is this. Not all ghost ships are found. Some are built. And sometimes they're sent back. 796.M41. The Gaunt Triumph is found circling a nameless world. Its crew speaks in whimpers. They say the void sang. They say it bled. There are ships we speak of in warning. Others we deny aloud. And then there are those no one is allowed to remember. The Imperium does not erase things easily. It drowns them. Beneath forms, beneath liturgies, beneath the weight of contradictory authorizations that no one has clearance to read. But sometimes, forgetting isn't policy, it's survival. When Amphion Deed was executed, it wasn't for trade violations or warp heresy. It was for proximity. The Ordo Xenos burned him before he could speak his last sentence. His fortune was never recovered. His name was scratched from servitor ledgers. But the coordinates his ship logged? They still update themselves. Every 20 days. Some say he found a station that speaks. A hull grown from crystal and gravity inversion. Not a ghost ship, but something older, something that remembers dying before the galaxy was born. Whatever it was, he made a deal. And then the silence came. Other stories end the same way. The daughter of Regals, ambushed by Rakgol marauders. No black box, no warp trail. But months later, a vox beacon from Lucin's breath began broadcasting an audio loop in perfect mimicry of the ship's final prayer. It had no origin, no carrier frequency. It just started. In 813 of M41, the Maw shut, not blocked, closed, as if the warp decided to blink. No ships in, none out. Footfall starved. Hab riots ignited. Void cults rose. Then the storm eased. And still, no explanation. Not from the Mechanicus. Not from Battlefleet Calixis. Not even from the Inquisition. The official report read, "Tactical fluctuation within acceptable margins of void stability. 23 million died." And then the names began to vanish. Not the dead, the records. Whole supply ships erased from rotation logs. Nobles who had owned Hab tiers simply no longer listed. Officiators asked who issued the clearance for their deletion. No one answered. In sealed vaults beneath Port Wanda, there are wreck fragments too dangerous to destroy. Hull runes that rewrite pict logs. Vox bones that transmit backwards. Cogitator cores that generate data in languages the Imperium has never spoken. They are not quarantined, they are listened to. Because someone still hopes for meaning, and someone else fears it will speak again. Ask a Magos of the Disciples of Thule what was found in the processional of the damned, and they'll speak of magnetic tides and errant warp matter. Ask one who survived it and they'll cry when they say nothing. Because that's the only thing that still remembers them. Nothing. Not data, not voice, not shrine, just silence. But silence isn't absence, it's warning. Every ghost ship that returns is a fracture. Every sealed log a scar the Imperium chose not to cauterize. Because these aren't anomalies. They are messages, and we were never meant to read them.